Have you ever stopped and thought about how you could possibly grade a conversation? I mean, it's so natural, so personal. It just feels impossible, right? Well, believe it or not, there's actually a science to it. There's a structured way to measure speaking, all the way from a single word to a full-blown speech. And today, we're going to break it all down, step by step.
So here's our game plan. We're going to climb this ladder of speaking skills. We'll start at the very bottom, looking at the basic toolkit every speaker has. Then we'll move up through simple responses into what makes a real conversation, all the way to the top, commanding the stage with a monologue. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why having this framework is such a game changer.
So, first things first, let's talk about the big challenge here.
This is really the heart of the matter, isn't it? How do you take the art of conversation and turn it into something you can actually measure? Well, to do that, you need a system. You need a framework that can break down this incredibly complex skill into manageable pieces.
So where does a framework like that even start? Not with big, long sentences, but with the fundamental tools every speaker uses. I want you to think of it like a toolkit, and inside there are two main trays, the micro and the macro.
So on one side, you've got your micro skills. These are the nuts and bolts, the individual building blocks. We're talking pronunciation, grammar, the rhythm of your speech. But on the other side, you have the macro skills. This is the big picture, the architecture. It's about cohesion, making sure your ideas actually connect, and coherence, which is all about whether your overall message makes sense in that specific social situation. You absolutely need both to build something that's going to stand up.
All right, so we've got our toolkit. Now it's time to actually start our climb up the ladder of assessment. And we're starting with the two most fundamental types of speaking.
The very first rung, the ground floor, is what we call imitative speaking. This is pure and simple mimicry. The goal here isn't to test if you know what the words mean. It's just to see if you can hear sounds and reproduce them accurately. That's it.
So how do you test this? Well, usually with simple repetition. A really famous example is the phone pass test. A computer just reads a sentence, and your only job is to repeat it back. There's no creativity, no thinking involved. It's just a super direct way to isolate and check those foundational micro skills we were just talking about.
Okay, let's take one step up to the next rung. This is intensive speaking. Now we're moving past just copying sounds. Here, the speaker actually has to produce some language, but, and this is key, it's super controlled and focused on hitting very specific grammar or vocabulary points.
The key word here is control. An assessor isn't looking for some deep, meaningful conversation. They just want to see if you can handle a very specific, narrow task, like describing what's in a picture or reading a short paragraph out loud. By keeping the task so focused, they can really zoom in on specific skills without all the messiness of a real back and forth.
Okay, we've built a pretty solid foundation on those first two rungs. Now we're climbing into the middle of the ladder, and this is where real, two-way communication finally starts to happen.
This next level up is responsive speaking. You can think of this as the bridge to a true conversation. It's still a little limited, think simple question and answer, but now it requires the speaker to actually listen, understand, and then come up with a relevant response.
So, testing this means you got to move beyond just one-word answers. For example, can you give someone simple directions to the library? Can you hear an idea and then restate it in your own words? These tasks aren't just about speaking anymore. They're about listening and reacting appropriately in a simple exchange.
All right, now we are getting to the good stuff, interactive speaking. This is where communication gets really dynamic, unpredictable, and spontaneous. We're talking about longer conversations, discussions, and the ability to manage things like taking turns, knowing when to interrupt, and asking for clarification.
To test this, you pretty much have to create a real conversation. You might be asked to role-play something like ordering food at a restaurant, or maybe debate a topic with a few other people. The goal isn't just to see if you can form sentences, but to see how you navigate that unpredictable flow, how you politely jump in or ask someone to repeat something, and just generally keep the conversation alive.
A classic example of this is the oral proficiency interview, or OPI. Think of it as a really carefully structured conversation where an expert interviewer is gently pushing you right to the very edge of your speaking ability. It's often called the gold standard because it's adaptive. It can pinpoint exactly where your skills start to break down, which gives you a super accurate read on your true fluency.
We have made it. We've climbed all the way to the top of our ladder. This is where a speaker moves beyond just having a conversation and learns how to hold the floor all by themselves. And that brings us to our final rung, Extensive speaking. This is the monologue. We're talking about giving a speech, telling a compelling story, or delivering a presentation. It's not just about talking for a long time. It's about structuring your thoughts for a sustained period and, this is crucial, holding your audience's attention without any help. Now, to test this, you need tasks that demand that kind of long-form speech. An assessor might ask you to prepare a 5-minute presentation, or they could give you a bunch of pictures and just say, "Tell me the story." What they're looking for are those high-level macro skills. Can you build a narrative? Can you link your ideas together in a logical way? Basically, can you command the room?
So we've climbed the entire ladder from top to bottom. But what's the big takeaway here? Why does breaking down speaking in this really structured way even matter?
Well, here's why it's so important. This whole framework takes the chaotic, really subjective art of speaking and transforms it into a clear, measurable journey. It gives both learners and teachers a shared roadmap. It lets you pinpoint specific weaknesses, like, hey, I'm great at responsive speaking, but I really struggle with interactive, and it shows you a clear path forward for how to get better.
So here it is, our whole ladder in one place. We start off as mimics, just repeating sounds. Then we learn how to produce controlled, short answers. From there, we build into simple back-and-forth interactions, which then blossom into dynamic, unpredictable discussions. And finally, at the very top, we learn to command the stage all on our own. It's such a clear, logical progression, from a single brick to an entire building.
And that's it. That's how you grade a conversation. You turn it into this structured climb from simple mimicry to a full-on monologue. And it leaves me with one final question for you. Now that you've seen the whole ladder, which one of those rungs do you think is the hardest to climb?